Hello and welcome to another MovieBoozer.com virtual pubcast. I'm your host Ken Eckman, and join me today is Hawk Ripjaw
Hello.
and Bill Leon.
Hello.
And we may be joined by Bill Arsenault later on. All right, we have an interesting list of new movies to talk about. We're going to start right off with the probably the most prominent movie on this list. Prominent as in box office. This is the only movie that's probably making any money right now on this list. Shazam, or as it would have been said in the mid-'60s, Shazam.
Or also, I was going to say Captain Marvel in the 40s.
Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
Because this is Shazam is also Captain Marvel, but Marvel bought the name, so now this character cannot be called that anymore.
Clearly, you missed the fact that I was doing a Gomer Pyle reference.
Well, I didn't. That went over my head, but I do. I want to talk about for no other reason than to kind of plug this History Channel special. I think it was called The History of Comic Books or something, and it like goes over all these different but they talk about the Captain Marvel thing in it. It was when Keith David was narrating every single History Channel special that existed at the time. I believe it's called The History of Comic Books. It was really good. Check it out. I mean, that aspect of it is so anyway, Shazam came out and everybody seems to love it. What does Hawk Ripjaw think of Shazam?
You said you loved it?
I said everybody seems to love it. I haven't watched
everybody seems to love it.
Yeah, I haven't.
It's a good movie. It's a really good movie. It's DC is really kind of moving away from the Zack Snyder verse that it started with Man of Steel. And it's with this and with Aquaman and to an extent with Wonder Woman, even though the third act of Wonder Woman was kind of a misfire. These new DC movies are really having a better understanding of the spirit of their characters, as well as a bit of self-referential humor in terms of the zeitgeist around the characters. Aquaman kind of understood that the pop culture attitude around Aquaman is kind of like, oh, he's stupid. And so the Aquaman movie was appropriately stupid in that way, but also made him badass. In the same way, Shazam is a very goofy character, and this is, Feet Forward is a very silly movie. First and foremost, it is a comedy, I would say, and then a superhero movie second. It has the standard superhero elements, but it's more of a funny comedy than it is anything else. It, for those that don't know what Shazam is, it stars this 14-year-old foster kid named Billy Batson. And he is given the powers of a wizard. So whenever he says Shazam, he's struck by lightning and turns into a superhero who's played by Zachary Levi in this movie. So this wizard that gives him his powers, he's played by Jimon Honsu. He is the last of a group of wizards who have been keeping at bay the 7 deadly sins. And then another man enters the realm of the wizards and awakens the deadly sins, and this man is played by Mark Strong. So a lot of this movie's humor revolves around Billy as Zachary Levi, interacting with this other kid in the foster home whose name I can't remember. He was in Stranger Things too, and he was a goofball in that one also. But it's a whole lot of goof-off comedy and stuff like that. A lot of people have been talking about how this is it really retains the spirit of like a late 90s, early 2000s superhero movie, specifically the first 2 Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. It has that kind of corniness to it, where it's got this comic booky silliness. It's got this, goofy looking extras. It's got just fun, in-jokey humor that the audience can appreciate without really getting too much in its own way with the humor.
It's not one of the main actors from Stranger Things, right?
It's the kid who saw the leper, I want to say. Or, I'm sorry, did I say Stranger Things? I meant to say. I'm sorry.
Oh, God. Okay, so now you've totally lost me. All right, that's fine. That's fine.
I said Stranger Things because in my mind, I was like, oh, it's the guy
kid.
from It. but not the kid from It that's also in Stranger Things.
Right. Yeah, there's some overlap there. I get
it. Finn Wolfhard is the kid that's in Stranger Things and It, but he's not in this movie. The one in this movie is
wait, hold on. Finn Wolfhard?
That's his name. Star? No, he plays Mike on Stranger Things.
No, he's a 16-year-old boy.
And in fact, there are a lot of grown women that have like sent him sexual advances and stuff, Ken, so don't feed into that. Just leave it alone. These Stranger Things kids need to live regular childhoods.
Well, I'm definitely not feeding into it because I didn't know about that. I was just making a comment on that name.
Jack Dylan Grazer.
These kids are having a hard time growing up because all these adults, like these weird adults watching Stranger Things, are sending them messages and stuff over Twitter. Like,
that's weird.
It's super weird. I don't agree with it.
Anyway, the kid is Jack Dylan Grazer, and Zachary Levi and Jack Dylan Grazer have a really fun dynamic because a lot of it revolves around Zachary Levi's performance as a kid who's in Zachary Levi's body. And so there's a lot of, they go into a convenience store and Shazam is like, I'd like to buy some of your finest beer, please. And, some of the things he says, just like, oh, okay, that's a kid saying that he's totally out of his element. And, learning his powers, he doesn't know what his powers are. So there's a great montage sequence of him trying things like, oh, flight test number 1. And so he's trying to figure out if he's able to fly. He's trying to figure out if maybe he's bulletproof. He was like, oh, the bullets bounced off, but maybe it's just the suit. Maybe it's not your face. Shoot the bullets at the face. See if the face is bulletproof. And, just goofy ass humor like that. It's directed by David F. Sandberg. It's directed by David Sandberg with a middle initial of unknown specificity. And he directed Lights Out and Annabelle Creation. So he's got, primarily a horror background, but he makes the movie work really well as a comedy. And it's more of a family-friendly comedy than most of the superhero movies have been, which kind of, again, lends it to that late 90s, early 2000s feel, with a more broadly appealing superhero movies that aren't so grim and heavy and interconnected. It also there is one semi-violent, violent for PG-13 sequence where the 7 deadly sins slaughter a boardroom of executives, and it felt very in brand with the scene in Spider-Man 2 where Doc Ock awakens in the hospital and slaughters a room full of surgeons. It had that same kind of feel to it, people running around and screaming and being thrown around and stuff like that.
I always think about the scene in Dogma where they go into the boardroom and shoot the boardroom up in that.
It was more an actual supernatural horror feel than that, but
right.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Mark Strong is great as the villain. The villain himself isn't that interesting. His whole thing is, I was picked on. My dad was a dick to me as a kid, and I wasn't able to have this power when I first found this chamber as a child. But now I'm an adult and I have the power, and I'm evil. And that's about all there is to his character. But at the same time, it's not really the focus. The focus really is on Shazam discovering his powers, and then a lot of goofy stuff like that. And there's a lot of fun gags, like during the final fight. Mark Strong's character is like saying like, I will tear you and devour you and like all this shit, and then but he's a little bit too far away, so Shazam can't hear what he's saying. Like, wait, are you doing an evil speech? I can't hear you. Just very, very silly, lighthearted movie. It's fun. It's not perfect. It's not amazing. But I think that DC is really moving in a really good direction by slowing down, not trying to build a cinematic universe, dropping the super grim, sad shit of the first 3 movies in the universe, and they're making it a lot more fun with standalone movies that have a sense of humor about themselves.
They're letting comic book movies be a little bit comic-y.
Exactly, even in a way that almost overshadows the way the Avengers movies do it. I mean, the Avengers movies are building towards something big, and they've done it in a very, very effective way that no other cinematic universe has ever done. And that's fine. Marvel has that corner of the market right now. Is a DC, they're making superhero movies again, and that's great. And there's very little in Shazam to tie it to anything else in the DC universe.
Well, that's what I was going to bring up. Is I watched the Half in the Bag review of this film, and they talk about the end credits. Like there's a There's a stinger to this movie.
It's wait. Are you talking about the mid-end credit stinger or the end of movie stinger?
I don't know. I haven't watched the movie, but they talked about there's a thing that ties this into the DCEU is what they're calling it.
Well, I have it. I have it. Wikipedia describes it right here. It says in the mid-credit scene, an imprisoned Savannah is recruited into a partnership with the caterpillar-like creature Mr. Mind. And in the post-credit scene, Freddy tests whether Shazam can talk to fish, citing Aquaman, only for Shazam to dismiss the power as stupid.
Yeah, that was really funny. Because
Okay.
it's like, oh, what my power could be this, and then Shazam, or as Zachary Levi is wearing the Jack Dylan Grazer is wearing like an Aquaman shirt. He's like, oh wait, that's stupid. But no, they're at the end of the movie. Superman shows up, but it's only from the neck down. So it's not Henry Cavill. It's just Superman from the neck down. So I would call it less of a tie-in than just
or did they just spend a lot of money CGing him out of it?
That's funny, but no. Henry Cavill couldn't do it, so they just got Zachary Levi's stunt double to wear the suit and just film it from the waist down, or from the neck down. And it just ended up being a funny gag, not really a tie into the DCEU, just kind of a goof.
What if instead of the Superman suit, when Superman appears, he's like completely invisible except for a giant mustache?
That's a really old joke at this point.
Yeah, but I'm going to keep making it because it was one of the single worst things in any major movie I've ever seen.
Yeah. But and that's about all there is to Shazam. It's definitely worth checking out for a matinee, perhaps. It's a good time, and it's a pretty breezy. I think it's under 2 hours. So.
All right. Well, I've heard nothing but good, so I do plan on seeing it as soon as I have an opportunity. So, yeah, we'll go ahead then and move on to the next film on this list, which is certainly not a super breezy, it's an entertaining movie in its own way, but not in a positive, enlightening way. It's more of a dark and depressing way. Hotel Mumbai. For those who are unfamiliar with the events that this film have surrounding it, the movie depicts a single event from the Mumbai attacks of 2008. In India, there was a horrible terrorist attack in which a group of, my understanding is mostly Pakistani nationals who were trained in military action, basically spread throughout the city, found population centers and that were targeted, and just started gunning people down and exploding stuff. This movie takes place in the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel, which is a very expensive, exclusive hotel in the middle of India, or in the middle of Mumbai, and the focus of the movie is Dev Patel plays this porter at the hotel, and sort of the majority of the story is sort of told from his perspective, though it does jump to a few other points of view. The reason why this hotel was targeted is because it had a lot of Western tourists there, and so you have actors like Armie Hammer shows up, Jason Isaacs shows up, and stuff like that.
Does Jason Isaacs play a villain, or is he a protagonist?
Jason Isaacs, it's actually kind of awesome. His character in the movie is probably the only character in the film who reads as a character as opposed to an actual real person. He plays a Russian businessman who is at the hotel, and his character gets a little more backstory than he probably even needed, because he's a businessman, and like early in the film he's ordering hookers from the table at a restaurant, and everyone's like, what the fuck is this guy doing? And when the terrorists strike, he's sort of is one of the people who kind of takes action to find safety and stuff. And it turns out that he's like former special forces that comes out, but it's actually a really awesome character. because he's kind of a badass. But word of warning, in this movie, a lot of people, unfortunately, do not make it to the end because it's based on a true story, and a lot of the characters depicted in this are amalgams of real people.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't say for sure. I haven't heard anything about Jason Isaacs' character being real, but if it's Jason Isaacs, and if you enjoy him playing up his, he kind of plays larger than life characters quite a bit, and this certainly fits that. Anyway, so basically, Dev Patel's character is he's a Sikh, and that's sort of a perfect little way of demonstrating Western ignorance, because Sikhs are not Muslim and the terrorists are Muslim, but of course people immediately assume he's a Muslim just because he has a turban, which, by the way, turbans are not worn by Muslims at all.
No.
Right. I read there's a lot of religious nuance in this movie in terms of him being, confronting it and being challenged on it and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. Well, some people would question why you would cast Dev Patel since he is not a Sikh. The truth is, it would actually be very difficult to cast a devout Sikh actor in the role that he plays, because one of the subplots of or not subplots, one of the story elements of the film is that his character is a very devout Sikh, and for a Sikh to take their turban off in public and reveal their hair like that is considered shameful. And there's a very dramatic scene in the movie in which his character does it specifically because he needs basically to some piece of cloth to help someone who's bleeding out. And it's a very dramatic moment because he made a decision that it was the only way he was going to be able to save this person's life. But at the same time, if an actual Sikh did that just for a movie, that wouldn't be very good for them.
Yeah.
So you really can't cast a Sikh to play the character, unfortunately. But it's very respectful, as far as I can tell. I mean, I'm not an expert. It's Sikhism, I think it is, but it's a very heartfelt performance. Honestly, I went to see this movie specifically because I really enjoy Dev Patel, and I think he needs more starring roles, and this was an excellent character for him to play.
Did you get any action beats? I thought I was reading somewhere that he muscled up. He got really in shape for this role.
Well, it is a very physical and demanding role, but when you say action, this movie is not. I wouldn't call it an action movie because it's a very realistic depiction of what happens to people when they're caught up in a mass shooting situation, which is mostly panic mode. Right. So there's no point where Dev Patel, a gun clatters to the floor, he looks down, the other guy looks at the gun, and they make a run for it or something. You don't get crap like that.
Okay.
But it is, when I say it's a physically demanding role, he does have a lot to do in the movie. It's just mostly life-saving stuff. And one thing that I really like about this movie is a lot of times when you have a movie, especially considering one of the conceits of the movie is that it's at a hotel where there are Western tourists, is while the Western tourists appear in the film, they are by no means the focus. The people who are depicted as most heroic are all Indian characters, Indian nationals. And I respect that. It's because it's probably more realistic anyway. And the truth is, far more Indians died in this attack than Western tourists. Many of the Western tourists got away. There were many who, some who were killed too, but ultimately, it's not an easy movie to watch because it is very brutal. And when I say brutal, it really highlights the brutality of this terrorist action and of mass shootings in general. One thing this movie also does, I think, quite right, is it doesn't demonize the terrorists so much as it humanizes them to a frightening degree, because they're depicted very much, I mean, obviously you cannot in any way, it's impossible to empathetically portray a terrorist when the movie is supposed to make you root for the people that they're attacking, especially. You just can't ask that. The film doesn't try to. What the film does is it shows what, in very subtle, small moments throughout the film, as they're carrying out these horrible acts, it shows the toll that it's taking on them. And you get hints of their life before this, that they clearly came from broken homes, or they came from a background where they just don't have access to things. There's one character in it, one of the terrorists in the film, in a moment of really awkward, like right in the middle of committing this heinous act, he points out how, he's basically surprised that people have machines that allow them to shit indoors.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, it's a fact that some parts of the Middle East are so completely absent of things we consider, everyday necessities, such as having a bathroom. That because it really does highlight that poverty is really the cause of radicalism, not so much. It's not the religion that's the problem. It's the factors that are contributing to the disassociation from normal society that these people go through. And I enjoyed this movie. I thought that it was a very serious but very useful as a teaching point of view, to show people how this sort of thing occurs. And it also as a teaching tool, it shows you things not to do when there's people with guns who are coming for you. Oh my God, it's really a brutal movie to watch, and I don't recommend it to people who get anxious very easily.
All right.
So that's really all I have to say about that. Let's move on to something a little bit more, positive. Bill Leon, you've started watching Miracle Workers.
I watched all of Miracle Workers.
Oh, you did?
It's a mini series, so I don't think it's going to continue, but you never know with television these days. You never know. So I think it was like 6 or 7 episodes.
It says here 7 episodes.
7 episodes.
Oh, it's a Lorne Michaels production?
Well, I mean, he gets
top billing as producer, but there are others.
Probably gave it some money, right?
Yeah, I was going to say that probably means that he was just bankrolling the project.
He bankrolled the project.
One of the guys from Lonely Island directed a few episodes. It wasn't Andy Samberg, obviously. I'm trying to remember if it was Akiva or Yorma. I think it was Yorma.
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah. So Miracle Workers is a show by the writer Simon Rich, who worked on SNL for a while. He wrote some book that ended up being the basis for the TV series Man Seeking Woman, which was good. I enjoyed that series. And this is kind of the same thing, where it's this kind of high concept, absurdist take on a subject. And in this case, it's religion, the afterlife, and just existence in general. This show was very highly publicized, and there was a lot of advertisements for it. Steve Buscemi plays God. Did you guys see any of the ads for the show?
Yeah, I'll be honest,
definitely.
I hadn't even heard about this show until you mentioned it today.
Oh, okay. Well,
I've been seeing a ton of ads on Hulu.
Yeah, which makes sense because it aired on TBS and TBS Hulu.
Oh, okay.
Turner Broadcasting makes total sense. the show Miracle Workers is about Steve Buscemi plays God, the Christian idea of God, and he's just like he's a washed up loser.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And Steve Buscemi is fantastic in the role, but he's a washed up loser. He's really ashamed of what he's created in Earth. By the way, like anyone listening that's interested in this show, cut this off, go watch it, because I'm gonna spoil stuff. And I think if you're
too much,
if you want to watch the show, go watch the show, because it surprised me. I thought based on the marketing that it would be kind of corny, but it surprised me and I ended up really enjoying it. So by the end of the limited series, you find out that God he has parents and he has siblings, that he's the black sheep of his family. God is a fuck up in the context of this show. Earth is like this creation that his siblings and his parents kind of ridicule behind his back. And that's so goddamn funny. Like that really only comes into play in the last episode, but like I don't think either of you guys are gonna fucking rush out and watch this thing because of my review. So I don't feel uncomfortable spoiling it. It's just so funny to me how they portray God as this. I mean, when you first see him at the beginning of the series, he's kind of this bitter, spiteful, vengeful character, which makes sense. And the whole crux of that is just like how bad things have gotten on Earth, and that's a story element to it. Because God is always just feeling sorry for himself. He's a very miserable character. And then when you find out why at the end of the season, quote unquote, because I don't think they're going to make more of this. I think this was just supposed to be like a mini series type of deal. When you find out why at the end of this season, it's just because of the fact that like he is the black sheep of his family. He's always been a fuck up. And that's why Earth is so screwed up. But so the main thing of the show, the main plot of the show is that there are the Heaven is a corporation. The people that work at Heaven Incorporated are randomly selected mortals that die, and the main characters they go over their backstory at one point, and they've all been around for like thousands of years. Daniel Radcliffe's character is revealed to be like a caveman type, and the girl, I can't remember her. I don't know. I don't have the information in front of me. She was one of the daughters in Blockers. She played John Cena's daughter. She was like a barbarian.
Okay. A barbarian, like Conan the Barbarian, or
kind of, yeah, like a Game of Thrones. Like the scene of her, they show a scene of her and as a mortal, and it's very Game of Thrones like. It's probably a parody of Game of Thrones, and it's over my head. But the show is really interesting in that, like, I feel like Christians would probably not appreciate what they're doing. Especially
not appreciate it, as in you're saying it would offend them, or are you saying not appreciate as in you have like what kind of point of view is it making? I guess is what I'm wondering. Or would answering that be a spoiler?
Is it dunking on religion, or is it giving an alternative view of it?
I don't think it's really concerned with religion. Like it's kind of a parody of the whole concept of God created the heaven and the earth and all that stuff. Because again, like by the end of the series, you find out that God is a small, like he's a small part of a greater thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the fuck up of his family. His family is working on all this outer space stuff or whatever. It's not specific about it. But the show
Okay.
so the show is by a guy named Simon Rich, who made Man-Seeking Woman.
Mm-hmm.
Man-Seeking Woman is a very absurdist kind of show where it's about a guy who's trying to find love, but his experiences through the show are portrayed as like just so out there and ridiculous and absurdist. And this show really follows suit spiritually.
Okay. All right. Well, it sounds like an interesting show. I'll have to check it out at some point. Where is it available currently?
It's a TBS show, so if you have a cable package, you can use TBS on demand or the TBS app, which is TBS actually has been really kind of killing it right now with their original content. You got Search Party and you got Final Space, and now you have Miracle Workers. TBS is
the other one. It's there's like it's this parody of Lost. It's called Wrecked, I think.
I haven't seen that one. Is that good?
It's a Lost parody. It's pretty funny. It's a little like college level humor, but it's I think it's called Wrecked. Let me verify that. But it's it's a kind of like a Lost / Lord of the Flies parody, and it ends up being pretty darn funny just with the dynamics. All the characters are kind of wacky, and you think they wouldn't be able to pull very much from the concept of all these assholes are stranded on an island together, but they've got like 3 or 4 seasons on it.
That's how I felt about. Yeah, that's how I felt about Miracle Workers, is because the marketing isn't really. There's this other show on TV, and I don't remember what the fuck the title is. If anybody knows what I'm talking about, please help me out here. It's about like God is emailing this dude. It's like a
God Friended Me.
God Friended Me. Yeah, that seems like. So like that show came out, and then I would see ads for this, and I was like, what is this?
God Friended Me is a as far as I know, I haven't seen it, but I believe that is intended to be a very wholesome and religious themed show.
It's very much a modern day Touched by an Angel.
It is a religious show about a guy who becomes religious and stuff like that. So
okay.
I think that's different from the alternative comedy of Miracle Workers.
Yeah.
Miracle Workers, yeah, like it's a very absurdist take on it. So yeah, especially if you're bringing up Touched by an Angel, which my mother watched constantly when I was growing up. I'm familiar with Touched by an Angel.
There has to be now a parody of God Friended Me called God Shitposted Me.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, as far as like a 10 Commandments would be, and if you could, that's I'm comparing it on this like grand scale. I've already fucked up by bringing up 10 Commandments, but let's say that God Friended Me is 10 Commandments. Miracle Workers is Life of Brian.
Okay.
It is a good religious satire, and it works in its own little universe. It plays by its own rules. And that's why I feel like it would probably piss off a lot of Christian people that might take a chance on it. Because, first of all, again, God, played by Steve Buscemi, who's great in the role, is portrayed as this very... he's in a state of arrested development. Like
a midlife crisis, maybe?
He's going through a midlife crisis. Everyone around him is a yes man. Every single employee that interacts with God doesn't want to piss him off. Like they're all very delicate with him, and that's also part of why he doesn't really grow as a character throughout most of the series. Any kind of character growth he goes through it comes up in the last 2 episodes because of plot, but the way that he's portrayed is this sheltered CEO, rich guy. Nobody that works for him wants to piss him off. Like, and it's an interesting way to look at God and the creator of Earth, and how crazy our lives are and our worlds are right now. You know what I mean? Because it is like, maybe there's a Trump allegory in there somewhere. It's just like this guy in over his head being pampered by everyone around him, but really like everything's going to shit and it's kind of his fault, but at the same, you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I do. And by the way, that sounds like an exact description of The Beach Bum.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, kind of. Except that The Beach Bum is a little more laissez-faire.
So The Beach Bum is the latest movie by Harmony Korine. And I would argue this is probably Harmony Korine's most commercially viable movie.
It's accessible, kind of.
Yeah. Now, successful.
I'm gonna cut you off.
Accessible.
Oh, yeah.
Wait a minute. Accessibility aside, did this make more money than Spring Breakers? Because
I think Spring Breakers actually did make more money.
I don't believe this is doing very well.
Spring Breakers had the advent of those young actresses and fans of those young actresses going to see it, and
James Franco.
When I went to see Spring Breakers in the movie theater, it was all college kids, and half of them walked out, but they were there. They bought the tickets. Like, it appealed
by about the fifth montage of people going Spring Break.
Hell yeah. There were a lot of couples. There were a lot of couples, but the college crowd turned out for Spring Breakers in my town, and that.
So The Beach Bum has made $3.5 million on a $5 million budget. Spring Breakers also had a $5 million budget and brought in $31.7 million. It had a good, solid first weekend.
Yeah, I think The Beach Bum came out at the the wrong time.
And was poorly marketed. I think with the right marketing, this probably could have been like a cult. This is going to be a cult success down the road.
They definitely didn't spend very much money on marketing, and I think I would almost challenge the decision to even release this in theaters.
Yeah.
I almost wonder if this would have done better as just a direct to VOD. Not that I don't want to play.
I mean, the cinematography is so good; it was worth watching on the big screen. I will say.
I would say so for sure. I just don't know if it is a theater movie that people would normally go see. But I agree that I very much enjoyed seeing it on the large screen, especially with the visual elements and the editing and the sound as well. I mean, it's a lot of really good music in the movie.
So I'll go ahead and do a quick synopsis of the plot. Matthew McConaughey plays Moondog, who is a poet, a aging hippie poet who came of age in the 60s and 70s and was really popular at one point in time for his incisive commentary and his poems, which were mostly about living a free and a free and easy life, as opposed to conforming to the system. Fast forward, of course, to present, and Moondog is basically, I would say, like, to describe his lifestyle, it's basically the only rules are those that he lives by, and his only rule is that there really are no rules. Moondog, he basically sleeps with anyone he wants. He drinks and does whatever drugs he wants, and all in the name of his own personal self-satisfaction. Mm-hmm. And he expects everyone to just understand that is his life. And weirdly, his ex-wife kind of loves him for that. So when the movie opens, he's in the Florida Keys and living on a houseboat, which he doesn't even own. He's just sort of living with this woman. And
the woman is the one that has all the money. It should be noted, played by.
I haven't talked about his wife doesn't own the houseboat. The houseboat's owned by
houseboat. Okay, you cut off when you said houseboat. I only heard house.
Oh, okay. So the houseboat that he lives on is he's basically just there because, you know, for the free rent and a place to pass out at night, which he literally does every night. Mm-hmm. He returns though home to his house in Miami, which he doesn't own. It's his wife who owns it. And his wife is independently wealthy. His ex-wife, I should say, or are they still married at the point? They're separated for sure. I will say. Anyway, so his wife is played by Isla Fisher.
That's right. Yeah. And
his wife Minnie is throwing a big party because their daughter is getting married to. Is being married to Limp Dick. That's what his character is credited as.
He has a name at one point, but it's such a like common white guy name, and it's mentioned once. I think it's like David or something like that.
Yeah, Frank is what his name is.
Frank. Okay, but yeah, like
every film's credits, in the film's credits, he's listed as Joshua Ritter as Limp Dick. So basically. The wife is long separated from Moondog, but she still loves him, and he still loves her to an extent, as much as Moondog can love anyone, which is to say he pretty much just loves himself. Mm-hmm. What's kind of interesting is there's a direct correlation here between Jeremiah Sand in Mandy and Moondog in this. The main difference being that Jeremiah Sand loved himself so much that he started a cult about himself. Moondog loves himself so much that rather than, but really that he literally he couldn't attract it's hard to explain. It's like, it's a self-involvement that's almost to a level even higher where no one can stand to be around him for too long. Small drop-ins are more than enough.
Yeah.
He wears out his welcome is the point.
The thing that really did it for me with The Beach Bum is that it's such a relaxed movie. It does have this kind of undercurrent of tension with how self-absorbed and destructive this character is, Moondog is, but also the movie it really kind of sucks you into his view on life, where it's just, hey, just enjoy life. Why are you worrying about this thing that's going to happen tomorrow? Why are you worrying about this thing that's happening at home? Like, just kind of enjoy yourself, because that, we're only here once, and a whole bunch of like hippie crap. But it's
well now the thing is, while it's espousing this, Moondog is doing some pretty horrible things. In fact, pretty much everyone who Moondog touches in this film, their life is made worse by his presence, and sometimes they don't even know it.
True. That's true. But
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So the way that it's something that Harmony Korine is very gifted at doing is that he's able to portray horrible things and horrible people, but he portrays the people doing them as so I don't want to say righteous, but they are content with themselves in a way that kind of makes it a little more easygoing to watch it. Mm-hmm. Spring Breakers not so much, because these were clearly criminals.
Spring Breakers was basically honestly, I think that entire movie's premise was him trying to get MTV back for years and years of spring break bullshit.
That's very likely, considering Harmony Korine and who he is. But it's like there's just kind of like this laid back feeling to Beach Bum, even when Moondog is a destructive piece of shit. It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to hate him, I guess.
Well, I think probably the most interesting aspect of this film is one of the probably the film's greatest moment of drama, and this is where we get into some spoiler territory, is after the first act of the movie, Minnie and Moondog go driving off, and Minnie they end up getting in a horrible car accident, and Minnie dies, and Moondog survives. Now, in any other movie from any other director and from any other screenwriter, characters in the movie would blame Moondog for her death. And there would be this dramatic moment of, you did this. This is why you can't, this is why you need to stop drinking. But instead, there isn't a single person who blames him for it.
Not only that,
not even the daughter, who clearly is not a fan of him.
Right, and he does have to go to rehab, but there's one scene in rehab after which he breaks out. It's never referenced again. At the end of the movie, it's like, yeah, you did it. You completed your sobriety, or whatever it was. That's not the exact line, but it's like, oh, he reached the end of his journey. But, the story of Moondog is something of a hero's journey, because the whole plot following his wife's death is that he has to, publish a book in order to, get to get her inheritance. He does not get any money unless he publishes a book of, his next book of poetry at Minnie's instruction in her will. And, the movie is then after that structured as sort of a hero's journey of him trying to find himself and write that book. And he continually messes up, and he never really does anything truly selfless or anything to advance himself as a character. And yet at the end of the movie, he still completed his goal and reached the end of his journey, having not changed as a character.
Because that was his journey. His journey was towards
the journey was to himself, to find his true self, which is, who he was.
Right. The irony of the film is that he has an arc, and that arc is just him doubling down on the fact that he is who he is, and there's nothing that can stop it.
That's kind of why I would not want to be like Moondog. I would not want to know anybody like Moondog. In fact, I think I do know somebody who is like Moondog, and I cannot stand this person for any more than about 30 minutes at a time. But something about Matthew McConaughey as Moondog and watching this journey from behind the safety of the lens of the camera is really kind of an interesting trip, especially with, Jimmy Buffett is a main character in the movie as himself. And there's a lot of Jimmy Buffett music in this movie. I'm not a huge Jimmy Buffett fan, but he is great in this movie. And it's just kind of like him and Snoop Dogg, who plays a different character.
Named Lingerie.
Lingerie, but it's still Snoop Dogg playing himself, essentially.
Yes.
It's kind of it's like a hangout movie, essentially, in many respects. And it's kind of hard to hate, even though it's a very hateable character.
I would really love to have been in the same room as Snoop Dogg and Jimmy Buffett as they were talking music. What kind of conversation do you think they would have?
Probably not unlike the kind of conversations that Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart have.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, when you get the munchies, you become a gourmand, I suppose.
I guess, yeah. I would love to see what Martha Stewart considers munchies. She probably spends a fucking half hour making something and then eats it.
I would pay to see Martha Stewart high. I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be very interesting.
Speaking of high, one of my favorite elements of this movie is Snoop Dogg's biggest, his cohort is this guy who has glaucoma in both eyes and is stated to have 98% blindness, and he smokes a blunt about the size of a large waffle cone. And it's so stupid. And
there's a scene where he's flying an airplane.
He's flying an airplane, and he does it perfectly.
Yeah.
And it's just it's the best character ever. He's barely in the movie. He's in the movie for 5 minutes, maybe 10.
I'm going to beg to differ, though. My favorite character in the movie was Martin Lawrence as Captain Whack.
Oh yeah. Oh, I forgot about him. And
Martin Lawrence in this is the world's worst dolphin tour guide.
Yes.
He basically has a boat. It's a shitty boat, and he's he fools tourists into thinking that they're going to go on this fun dolphin tour, and instead he just takes them out in the water and jumps in front of in the middle of a pool of sharks who proceed to maul his leg off.
you can see the joke coming a mile away. Like, obviously, this guy's a dumbass, and
Oh yeah,
this is going to go wrong. The moment they take this impressionable young white family who cover their ears at every expletive that Moondog and Captain Whack throw out, you're like, oh boy, this is going to end in blood.
it is kind of their fault for staying on the boat as long as they do.
And like the best part of the joke is that as it goes on, they're like getting really into the trip. They're like, yeah, this is awesome, and then they're kind of mildly amused when shit goes down. It's really, Armani Korine is such a fascinating director because he just makes shit, like not in the artistic sense of the word, but he makes really deplorable stories and characters, and yet he's such an artist that he has this incredible nuance to what he does that you really feel a connection to everybody, even as you hate them so much, and the characters are stupid and spiteful and everything, but it's like,
I'm a bit mixed on him as a filmmaker because I think he has the ability to do that, and I think this movie hit that note quite well. But I did not like Spring Breakers all that much, mostly because, I mean, I did enjoy Alien. That was a great character. But the characters in the film are so deplorable and heinous, and I just, it felt, and it honestly, it didn't feel like he was empathetic towards them. He was actively trying to get you to hate them more and more.
oh yeah, definitely. But then he kept showing them being successful, so he creates this cognitive dissonance in Spring Breakers that makes it a very odd watch. Like, he definitely likes to play with you, what you're thinking and feeling when you watch his movies.
Right. I mean,
a lot of directors do that, but when he does it on a character level like this, with this mix of themes and emotions and colors and sounds and things going on, I don't think there's any other director that has. I mean, he's not my favorite director, and I think he has had some misfires. But what he does to his viewer, just reactionary wise, is I think something that not a lot of directors explore very much.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on now to Dragged Across Concrete, movie that this movie. Well, first of all, it's the third film from S. Craig Zahler, whose previous films, Brawl in Cell Block 99 and Bone Tomahawk, are two of just the most brutal and in-your-face and awesome movies that I've seen in the last decade. I really enjoy both of them. And despite the fact that they're so violent, the other thing that is just so unique about them is Zahler, prior to his work as a filmmaker, he was a novelist, and there is a very writerly note in his screenplays. He has a knack for writing just the most creative dialogue for his characters, and that carries over into these films wholeheartedly. This movie manages the feat of telling a story over 2 hours and 39 minutes long, but keeping me absolutely on the edge of my seat through the entire movie.
Yes, it's also probably his most novelistic out of the trio.
Oh yeah,
and I do also want to state that just right out of the gate that Bone Tomahawk was both Bone Tomahawk and Brawl in Cell Block 99 made it onto my best of list of their respective years.
Yes.
And Dragged Across Concrete has a strong chance of pulling a hat trick in that regard. It's probably my favorite out of
my list.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely going to make it into my list, I think. Who knows what else I'll see this year. But as it stands, this is my favorite film of 2019 so far, and my favorite of Zahler's films.
Mm-hmm.
It's got Vince Vaughn and Mel Gibson as two cops, longtime partners. They are caught on camera being a little bit rough on a Latino suspect, which I mention his race specifically because there is a bit of racial tension in this movie, kind of on the fringes of the narrative in terms of, cultural zeitgeist and that sort of thing. Like it's not a whole lot of, this movie's been kind of touted as being a little bit white nationalist, and both you and I disagree with that. I think
absolutely I disagree. The thing about this movie is I think the people who are talking about it as being the movie for the Trump generation, these are people who either didn't watch the entire movie, or they're people who watched the movie and weren't paying attention to the subtext.
I would say that's people that watched the first 30 minutes of the movie for the sake of a headline and wrote about it, not to downplay journalism in that sense. But, you know, people think that that's fine. But really, it's there is some talk about culture and race on the fringe of the movie's narrative, but it does not define any of the characters. And, you know, to boot, the most deplorable characters in terms of their views are the ones that probably get it the worst, so to speak.
Yeah, it's worth noting that while Mel Gibson and Vince Vaughn are, for all intents and purposes, the most prominent roles in this movie, they're kind of these are not typical protagonists. And in fact, in my opinion, the true protagonist of this movie is Tory Kittles, who plays Henry, who's an ex-con who's sort of being forced back into a life of crime through his circumstances and his need to make money for his family. And what's interesting about this is how the movie begins with his character, and then his character kind of disappears from it, except for being seen through the eyes of Mel Gibson and Vince Vaughn in a few sequences. And then he reappears in it towards the end and becomes the full-on protagonist. And that, I think the main thing here is, yes, in the first 30, 40 minutes of the movie does depict Mel Gibson and Vince Vaughn's characters. And then when Don Johnson comes in as their lieutenant, they state the type of views that your typical police officer would probably be stating about the whole Black Lives Matter situation and racism amongst police officers. In that these police officers would not be in favor of being filmed everywhere they go. They wouldn't be in favor of having their lives tracked as much as they would. And what ends up happening is the moment they get punished for this, for this moment of violence towards a suspect who really didn't have it coming, the moment that happens, Mel Gibson's character decides to break the law and to make money another way. Now, he has admirable reasons for needing money. He has a wife and a daughter to think of, and that's understandable. But when you think about it, what Zoller is basically saying here, he's drawing a direct comparison between Mel Gibson's need to take care of his family and Tory Kittle's need to take care of his family. And interestingly, both of them are breaking the law to do the exact same thing.
And Mel Gibson's wife, or his character's wife, as a bit of subtext to his character, his daughter walks several blocks from school to their house through a very rough part of town and is consistently bullied and harassed by young teenagers. And his wife has a neurodegenerative disorder, and she barely can walk without the use of a cane. And it's stated at one point that Mel Gibson's character, he is not a good cop in the sense of the word, in the fact that he can be brutal, he can be rough on people, and that's why his pay is so shit. That's why he hasn't gotten a promotion in the 20 years that he's been in his position. And he actually used to be a partner with Don Johnson's character, who is now the chief lieutenant, whatever. And the first thing that his wife suggests is a security job. And he's like, I'm not going to do that. He immediately throws it out. So even when presented with a more honest ways of making a living, he immediately does not want to do that. And so his next recourse is to break the law, like you said.
So really, I just do not see the argument towards these characters being, yes, there are empathetic elements to these characters. Vince Vaughn, in particular, is empathetic because he's really just sticking around because he cares about his partner so much. But
I love the element of the two partners. So they end up deciding to intercept a heist, or they think they're going to intercept a drug bus and it ends up being a heist. But the Mel Gibson's character is, he's like, do not do this, because you want to help me. Don't do it because you're worried about me. Do it because you want to make money. Like, he's very cut and dried. Like, do not inject any element of care into this. But of course, there is that unspoken care for each other, and it's one of the best elements of the movie is that these two, honestly, pretty shitty dudes care about each other because they're partners, and they also have their own selfless reasons for doing what they're doing, but they're also really shitty people.
Oh yeah, I mean, the scene in which what's interesting is what gets them in trouble is being being overly violent to a suspect that they arrest. What wasn't caught on camera, what they weren't caught doing, was essentially Mel Gibson's character sexually harasses this woman by because when they bust in on her, she's essentially naked, and he forces her to take a shower in front of them, and then turns a fan on to make her feel cold as a way of torturing her.
And then she speaks fluent English. She said, "Oh, you said that if I told you what you needed to know, you'd let me go. You'd let me leave." And he kind of looks at her for a second, and he looks at his partner and said, "Do you understand any of that?" He said, "Nope." And so they're pretending like they don't know what she's saying, and they arrest her. And it's really like, at that moment, it's the first scene these characters are in, and immediately like, okay, these guys are assholes, and they're the protagonists potentially of this movie.
You're right, and which as I said, that turns out to be a feint, because Tory Kittles really is. We need to talk about his character. So early on in the film, Henry he comes home from his he gets out of prison, and when he gets to his family home, he finds out that his mother is on drugs and resorting to prostitution in order to bring money in, and she's doing all of this while his son is just in. Is it son or brother?
Little brother.
Little brother is in the is in the next room over, and the brother happens to be handicapped and in wheelchair bound.
It's worth noting that he is wheelchair bound as a result of an injury, and incapacitating the assailant is what put Kibbles in jail. Yes.
And so really, what's worth noting in this movie is, you're really empathetic towards him and towards what he has going on, and he winds up agreeing to take this bank heist job with these guys, not knowing that the rest of these people in this team of thieves, other than his own personal partner, are violent killers.
Yeah,
and the robbery goes pretty badly. 5 people end up dying, and they end up taking a hostage, and the 2 of them are basically forced at gunpoint to drive away, finding out pretty quickly that the rest of these robbers plan to kill them as soon as the job is over.
It's a great element of this movie where I was talking about this with Will, is that there's probably one truly likable character in this movie. Everyone else is a criminal or a killer or both. I guess being a killer would make you a criminal, but that's neither here nor there. They're all, a lot of them are just, they're bad people. But the movie consistently shows you some of these people are worse than others. So instead of wanting to see one character or 2 characters succeed, you want to see the worst characters fail. And so you're not really rooting for anybody to win. You're rooting for somebody else to fail, for things to be resolved in a satisfying way. And so it's a second layer of tension of this immense power struggle between all the characters in the movie. That it's pretty much from the halfway point on, it is just nonstop tension. Still a slow burn, but just this unbearable, nail-biting, just suspense throughout the second half of this 2.5-hour movie.
Absolutely, and what I have to say for that, I think Zoller, what he has going for him, and what really makes his films fun to watch is the dialogue between his characters, which I'm not going to call his dialogue particularly realistic. It's very stylized because every character in it has these quirks to their personality that that are very unique. They're all a little bit more literate than you would expect someone of their standing to be, and that's fine because it's to tell the story that he's trying to tell in a unique and interesting way. I mean, the same thing occurred in Bone Tomahawk. I was mentioning in our Facebook chat earlier that a few days back that one of my favorite elements of Bone Tomahawk is in the first 5 minutes of the movie. Sid Haig shows up as this really grungy looking criminal who's a throat cutter. He and his friend basically slit the throats of people, as they're sleeping to rob them. And he has this speech that he gives to his partner that he's basically training his partner to be a better throat cutter. And he goes into almost medical scientific detail as to the best way to do that.
Yeah.
And it is just, I mean, obviously no one in the Old West would have the scientific know-how to explain things the way he does. But it doesn't matter because it's telling an interesting story and in a way that you wouldn't expect.
Mm-hmm.
So I really enjoy that. There's another element to this film that I really enjoy is the way it's paced. This is a movie you could definitely call slow burn. I mean, as I mentioned, it is 2 hours and 39 minutes long, right. But every minute of this film is earned.
It's so deliberate. Like everything is there for a reason. There's not a second of wasted time.
Exactly. There's nothing that doesn't come back in. Like you'll see a scene and you'll wonder, what is this scene? And then an hour or even an hour and a half later, that scene will come back and you'll say, oh, so that's what it meant.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's something that is very rare for a movie of that length. There's usually, either there's a speech that goes on too long, or there is a scene that really didn't have to be there that you could have cut out. No, and that's sadly why this movie will never see its eyes in a major movie theater release, because it's just too long for a theater to take a chance on releasing it.
So actually, I do have a bit of context to that.
Mm-hmm.
Zoller almost got a wide release for this movie, but the distributor demanded that he cut 30 minutes out of the movie, and he refused.
Yeah, I don't honestly see where you could cut 30 minutes out of this movie and make it work.
I could see at the absolute most just very, very careful trims here and there and maybe get it down by 15 minutes. Just like a couple of long looks at each other. But like really the way that elongates expressions and things like that and moments, it just works. There's a scene where the partners are sitting in a car and Vince Vaughn's character is eating a sandwich, and it sounds like he's chewing glass.
Yes.
And it goes on for like 3 minutes. It's like a 2 or 3 minute plus scene, and he finally finishes it and licks his fingers, and Mel Gibson's like, I've been listening to you chew that for 98 fucking minutes.
Yeah.
It's great. Like the payoff of that line is fantastic, and it wouldn't have been nearly as good had that scene not been that long.
It is all about what I think Zoller is really a master of at this point. Now that he's got 3 movies under his belt, he's a master of excuse me, I have had a bit of a burp there. He's a master of timing in his scenes. Like things happen at just the right moment. And, whether it be the horrifying scene in Bone Tomahawk where a character gets cut in half, or something as simple as in Brawl in Cell Block 99, the sequence towards the beginning where he goes out to his car and he
does Street Fighter 3 on it and is tears the shit out of it.
Yes, exactly. He just beats the crap out of his car.
I actually rewatched Brawl and Cell Block 99 after watching Drive Across Concrete, and so I had that scene fresh in my mind as of a couple days ago, and it's still just as good as it was the first time.
Mm-hmm.
The best part being when he physically grabs the hood and tears it off and hucks it across the yard.
It's worth noting that another reason these movies are getting a lot of criticism as being right wing is that Zoller casts characters based on their ability to do the job, and sometimes those actors just happen to have political views, and you know what? That's not his fault.
Nope. I mean, an actor and his political views, I think, should be divorced from each other.
I agree. When you're,
Vaughn does a good job of that. I think Vince Vaughn is fairly right wing, but you wouldn't know it based on his film choices and the way he acts.
And here's the thing. I wouldn't even be surprised if he cast Don Johnson and Mel Gibson and Vince Vaughn because of their political beliefs, not because he believes in them, but because these characters that they're playing would believe those same things.
Right. I mean, he's not having any sort of political agenda by writing these characters this way either. These are the characters that are in this world, and they act a little bit larger than life, but they act as characters in this situation might act were they of that personality type, and I think that's okay.
Now, don't get me wrong. This movie is also not I mean, I've made a very strong argument for it not being right wing, but it's also not left wing. This movie is very centrist in that it just points out, frankly, the fact that the world's a fucked up place, and there's people on both sides who could stand to not be a dick.
Yeah, I mean,
if anything, that's sort of the point of this movie in general is that people who make these bad decisions are responsible for the deaths of so many people and good people. Yeah. And one of the most heartbreaking moments in this movie, and another thing that some people probably would have cut out if they were, a studio probably, if anyone cut this movie down, if a studio did, they would have cut out the whole sequence in which you get to know the Jennifer Carpenter, who plays Kelly, a employee of a bank, and you see her as she's just not, she's about ready to board a bus, but she's panicking, and she just doesn't want to go to work, and she comes home to her apartment, and her husband won't even open the door for her because she's used up all of her maternity leave. And they need the money, and she needs to get to work, and her job pays way more than his. And he basically forces her to go to work that day. And when she gets to work, she's, congratulated, and everyone's happy. And as soon as that happens, you realize what's going to happen, which is that is the bank that's being robbed.
Yes, and it's one of the most intense and fucked up bank robbery scenes I've ever seen put to film.
Oh, definitely. It might be the worst because it spends so much time getting you to know this person who will be a victim.
And then the bank robbers don't even talk. They have a tape recording that explains everything and asks questions with responses that are kind of tailored to what anybody could say in response to them. So it's almost like this. Someone pointed it out online. It's almost Lynchian, a David Lynchian looking sequence where these robbers are four robbers standing in ski masks, goggles, body armor, and one of them holding a tape recorder, just playing this. They're standing, just standing very, very still, and the tape is playing in this kind of weird voice. And it's just this horrible, creeping dread you get during this whole sequence because it lasts for several minutes.
And the responses on the tape recorder just happen to be perfect for the situation, which is kind of strange.
Exactly.
And yet
it's strange. So creepy. Like they have this robbery planned out so perfectly that their tape recording is tailored to the responses of the bank manager. It's like this twisting of the knife. Like you just want the scene to be over, but it keeps going in this incredibly dreadful way. And
it would be awkwardly comic in any other movie, but it somehow manages to be truly disturbing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think to summarize, this movie is going to be a hard one to beat this year. It's such an ambitious movie, and I it saddens me that a movie like this won't get more wider attention, and it really saddens me that so many people are misinterpreting this movie so horribly. I will take anyone to task who tells me that this movie is in any way sympathetic towards a specific political cause. This is a very humanistic movie in its own way.
If it makes you feel better, though, like most of the responses I've seen have kind of made that specific criticism sort of a microcosm of the overall response to it. Like a lot of people have a similar response, like, "Oh, I don't think so about that." Like, a lot of people that are seeing it, they either didn't like it because it was too slow and boring, or they really enjoyed it for reasons not at all related to politics.
Right.
So I think that was a snap response to it, but overall, most people are not really seeing it that way. So I think that's a good thing. The last thing I wanted to point out about it is that Bone Tomahawk and to a greater extent, Brawl and Cell Block 99 had very exploitative violence. And it's like, especially Brawl had like, holy shit, that guy's face got torn off.
Yeah.
Or holy fuck, that guy just got curb stomped and his jaw shattered. Like really like get your boys together, have some beers, and just yell at the screen while this shit happens. Dragged Across Concrete's violence is much more visceral and subdued, but it happens to people that you don't want to see it happen to, so it hurts more when you're watching it.
And it happens so fast that if you blink, you miss how horrible it is.
Yeah, and I think that had a huge impact in how, like, oh my god, that was brutal and horrible to watch. Instead of that's an awesome like midnight movie level of gore. This has everything about it is just horrible and grotesque and difficult to watch. It's hard to, like we're selling this movie like you should watch it. It's horrifying. It's disgusting and disturbing.
And yet I'm going to definitely watch it again and soon.
And I've already I rented it on Amazon and I watched it twice during my rental period. 48 hours. So
well, I'm going to buy it for as soon as it's purchasable.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Me too.
All right. Well, by the way, I just noticed the cinematographer of this movie is Benji Bakshi. I wonder if there's any relation to Ralph Bakshi.
Possibly.
I have no idea. All right. That's all I've got to say about that. Well, with that said, I do want to thank you all for joining us on this episode, and it was nice to talk about these movies, and we've got some whole host of interesting ones coming up in the next week. So,
got Hellboy coming up, right?
Yeah,
Hellboy, and I think After is coming out this weekend. I believe I'm co-reviewing After with Felix. Yeah, that is sure to be a shit show because it definitely appears to be some sort of spiritual successor, in a sense, to 50 Shades. It's at least this year's new erotic drama.
And I need to see and review The Best of Enemies, so we'll see if that's any good.
Oh, I heard it's not.
That's what I've heard, and it's unfortunate. But we'll see. Who knows? Maybe it's surprising.
Yeah, let's hope so.
All right. Have a good one.